And now, it's time for the Well-Read Llama with your host, author Erin Mifflin.
Hello, friends. I hope your winter is providing you with lots of cozy reading time. This week, there's something special happening. It's one of my favorite sporting events of the year. The U.S. National Figure Skating Championships will be taking place in Wichita, Kansas. I'm a big figure skating fan, and figure skating is a link between me and today's author. Ashlyn McKayla Ohm has written a trilogy that stars a competitive figure skater. I'll let her tell you more about that, as well as the story of how we met. Before we begin, please hop on over to Instagram and Facebook and follow me at author Erin Mifflin to keep up with my latest news and find out which authors we'll be interviewing next. Now let's bring in today's guest. Hi, Ashlyn, and welcome to the show.
Hi, Erin. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. With the U.S. Figure Skating National Championships coming up later this week, tell us about your book, When the Ice Melts.
Yes, When the Ice Melts is the first in my Climbing Higher series, and it is the story of a figure skater who has to rediscover who she is when her dreams are crushed. She ends up going on a quest to reclaim her true identity instead of finding that in her accomplishments and her sport. And it takes her all the way to the Canadian mountains.
Well, that's cool. I know it's a journey. I've read all 3 books, and they're excellent.
Thank you.
And so what was your inspiration for the series?
The inspiration came, probably unsurprisingly, when I was watching figure skating in the Olympics. And just, it was a moment when the skater who won gold in this particular event had won by a very heartbreaking margin. It was, I think, 1/100th of a point. And the interview afterwards with the girl who had come in second was just so gripping. You know, she was crying and had lost this, this moment by 100th of a point. And she said, I never have forgotten this. She said, I left it all on the ice. There's nothing left. And she was referring, I'm sure to the fact that she had given it her all, done her best. But that just struck me of, in a sense, she had indeed left everything on the ice. There was nothing left for her. And I just started thinking about what it would be like to be in that spot where something that you had defined yourself by was taken from you or didn't come out the way you had hoped it would. And what that process would be like of having to rebuild from that.
Yes.
And it was sort of from that this book was born.
That's really cool because sometimes you and I and different people, we go through times like that. Now, you and I are not competitive figure skaters, but sometimes it does feel like that rug gets pulled out from underneath us.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. So are you a fan of Olympic sports?
I am. I love watching the Olympics. I love following a lot of different sports. I have never participated in figure skating, but I really love watching it. And it was fun to explore it as a sport and as an art form in these books.
Yes.
There's a lot more to these books than skating. A lot of people will ask me, well, is it all about skating? I'm like, no, definitely not. But it was fun to have that as an element and a subplot in those because it allowed me to research something that was interesting to me, but I didn't know much about before now. And now, I've been able to learn a lot about it, which is really cool.
Mm-hmm. So in regard to When the Ice Melts, can you tell listeners how you and I met?
That is part of the learning about figure skating. So what happened was when I finished When the Ice Melts, I was well aware that even with my best efforts at research, I had probably, portrayed things unrealistically, left things out, made mistakes, and I really wanted someone with a much more higher level of expertise in figure skating than I had to fact check and just read over what I had. And I posted in a couple of different writing groups, asking if anyone would be willing to do so. And it was in the ACFW group, right, Erin?
I believe so,
responded?
Yeah.
I think so, yeah. And you responded and were so kind as to go through and help me find places where, things were not the most accurate or could be improved. And you ended up doing that for all 3 books, which was so kind and gave me the confidence as an author to know that what I was writing was not going to jar people who did know a lot about skating out of the story.
That was such a joy for me because I followed skating for so long and listened to podcasts and watched skating and different things. And so then to combine that with my love of writing and my love of helping other people, it was just the perfect match.
Well, it was perfect for me too. It was absolutely invaluable. Yes.
So yeah, it was a lot of fun. And so the mountains play such a big part in this Climbing Higher series. And so I wanted to ask you, why are the mountains important to you?
That is a great question. If you go to if you look on my website or my Substack or really anywhere I am online, you'll notice that I say it just about everywhere that I am a self-professed mountain girl. And this is true. The mountains are the place for me where I can hear God most clearly. They represent His presence to me. They are a place where I've often found healing, found peace, found direction. They've been a place that I can return to throughout my life in order to just really ground myself even more in Him. And they play a big part in my writing because, having had that experience myself, I enjoy placing my characters in the mountains and allowing them to experience just the beauty and the majesty and also the expanse, the out of your control bigness of the landscape, and ultimately using that as a metaphor for faith.
Yeah, and speaking of faith, that's also one thing that always stands out to me when I read your fiction is faith plays a huge role. So can you tell us a little bit about what your own faith journey has been like?
Yes, so I was raised in a wonderful Christian home with wonderful Christian parents, and I've always had, a relationship with God. But as happens for all of us who follow God, that relationship changes and deepens and grows. It's like a tree, it starts out small, and then since its roots down deeper, it puts out new branches, grows bigger, grows deeper, grows wider. And I've really experienced that, throughout my life as God has continued to lead me in different directions and, expand me in different ways and help me progressively let go of relying on my own strength or, relying on things that I thought were true about myself or about Him that weren't. And, the process of God working in my life, I'm very grateful for. And He often uses writing to do that. Writing is something that is worship for me, but at the same time, it's a way that He speaks to me, and tells me things I might not otherwise have heard or realized about myself. Yes. And I'm sure you've had that experience too.
Yes. And even in things like when I didn't know what the next scene was going to be about when I was writing, and, as you sit with it, all of a sudden you just know, and,
yes.
the inspiration comes from the Lord.
Absolutely. Yes. And the ultimate creativity comes from Him. He is the creator. He is the wellspring of all creativity. And to be able, as a Christian writer, through the Holy Spirit, to tap into that creativity and inspiration and just rejoice, writing is a form of rejoicing with Him, I believe.
Yes, I love that. I've never heard it phrased quite that way, but I like that a lot. And have you always wanted to be a writer?
Always. I began telling everyone when I was, very small, I'm going to be a writer when I grow up.
Yeah.
And my mom was, very, very wonderful, and she homeschooled me all the way, from kindergarten through 12th grade. And so once I started articulating that, and she could see that was sort of an area, where my strengths would pull me towards, she made sure I had every opportunity to learn how to write and to practice lots of different forms of writing, and she made sure that I could follow that path. In fact, today she is an English teacher herself and does a lot in that field, and today she's also the editor of my books.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Like you, I've always wanted to be a writer, and I remember when I was young enough that I hadn't yet learned how to read and write for myself, and I would tell other people stories and ask them to write them down for me. So, like you, that's just always been a part of who I am.
Yes.
And your actual first published book was a devotional called A Year in the Woods. And what's the
Yes.
focus of this devotional, and what led you to write it?
I began with a devotional nature blog in 2019. I would publish posts once or twice a month on there, and it was always an experience or an encounter that I had in nature paired with my photography and biblical spiritual application to that. And I did that for a couple of years, and a very kind and generous reader of my blog actually reached out to me and asked me if I had ever considered publishing a devotional book based on my blog posts, or repurposing them into content for the book. And I said, yes, I have thought about it, but I'm not sure about that. And this very kind reader ended up actually donating the cost to publish that first book.
Wow.
Which was an enormous blessing and a total God, moment
Yes.
that catapulted me into taking that leap of faith to publish that book in a way that I might not have said yes to otherwise. And so that was, that came A Year in the Woods. It's 52 weekly devotionals. They're seasonally themed and arranged. So there's one for, each week of the year. Each one has the nature focus and the scriptural application, and it's my own original photography in the book as well.
And I had not realized that until I was looking on your website to develop some of these questions for this interview. I didn't realize that you had your own original photography in there.
Yes. Photography is something that is a side hobby, but it ties in very well when I have, books like that really cry out for that immersive experience. I like to include the photography to just help the reader also become more grounded, in what they're reading and fully experience it through the visual side as well.
Yes. And you also more recently published another nonfiction book called High Country Hymnal, which is a collection of your own lyrical poems, prayers, and contemplations. And what do you hope readers will find in these pages?
Yes, High Country Hymnal it was a passion project of mine for sure. It is really born from, again, my love for the mountains and for the high country, but that's high country not only, in the sense of elevation and mountains and the geographical sense, but it's the spiritual sense as well. We're all attempting to reach the high country, and we're all climbing that way. And so High Country Hymnal, I really hope that it's an encouragement and it's an inspiration to people. And I want them to be able to find words in there, hopefully, that encapsulate what they're feeling. I would say it's my most personal book and probably my most vulnerable book. In fact, there are excerpts in there drawn directly from my own journals, which was, very, very much putting your heart out there.
Yes.
To write a book that's that personal. But it's really my prayer that readers can find rest in it and, just find hope and joy for, yes, the journey upward, and also those moments when it feels like you're down in the valley, and every moment in between. We do have the hope of a high country, and we do have the hope of a really glorious God who's with us every step of the journey. And that's what I really, hope shines through those pages.
That's awesome. And I like the play on words there, like you're talking about the high country, not just the mountains, but also
Yes.
looking for our heavenly home.
Yes.
And so do you enjoy reading the same kind of collections from other authors? And if so, who are some of your favorites?
I do. I really love the poetry of Gerard Manley Hopkins. His poems are very just so insightful and so tightly and beautifully placed. I also enjoy Anne Voskamp's writing very much. She leans very much towards the poetic and the lyrical in her prose. That's been a great inspiration to me. And then on the fiction side, as far as, influences on my fiction, K.D. Powner and Amanda Dykes are two of my favorite fiction writers. And then Madeline Lee Engel also. I could not talk about people who have influenced me without mentioning her, because her approach to writing both poetry and prose, and her courage to kind of tackle some of those gray areas and unexplored areas on the fringes of faith, and her willingness to just search out the mysteries of God. That's such an inspiration to me.
Do you have any more fiction books in the works?
I do. The Climbing Higher trilogy wrapped up this past April, but it's very hard to say goodbye to characters that you've loved and been a part of, has been a part of your life for 6 years. And so there will be a spin-off series to the Climbing Higher series. And I'm working on the first book of that right now, preparing it for publication, and it will be coming out this fall.
Well, that's exciting to hear.
Yes, I'm very excited about this series.
Is there a scripture that has been meaningful to you recently?
The scripture that has been most meaningful to me recently, I could pick from a few, but I'm thinking a lot right now about Psalm 65. Just because of different circumstances that are going on in my life and things that I'm, working through, this has just been a place that the Lord has led me to, that I've come back to again and again, because it's just such a great reflection on the goodness of God. The fact that he brings the rains, he takes care of the land, he is doing all of these incredibly generous acts of provision that we don't notice them necessarily because they're just happening in our day to day. But he's so abundantly generous that I think there's a verse in there that even talks about just the wagon tracks of God being overflowing with abundance. I really think that's just a beautiful thing to reflect on, that, there's so much goodness in God that it's spilling over, and being left in his tracks. And that, that it gives me hope and trust that, yes, he is going to provide, and everything I need can be found in the riches of Christ as he is so faithful and generous in his provision.
He really is. He always comes through for us.
Always, especially in really surprising ways, which is awesome.
Yes. And as you know, I am getting ready to get married. And
yes,
I've been thinking about God's provision too in different ways as we get ready to join our lives together, and also just meditating on the verses in Matthew 6 that talk about God knows our needs before we ask them.
Yes,
and when we seek first the kingdom of God, he's going to provide everything that we need. And he, if he clothes the grass of the field, he is going to make sure that we have food and clothing and the things that we need.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, what is the best way for readers to connect with you?
Probably the best way remains my websites, either one of them. It's ashlynmckaylaohm.com for my main kind of hub of my author offerings. And there's wordsfromthewilderness.com as well, which was, my original blog website and still houses my nature devotional writing. And also, something I'm very excited about is that this past month I began a Substack. So readers who are, familiar with Substack, enjoy it as a format. My Substack is also Words from the Wilderness. And I have everything on there. I have some short fiction, some blog posts and devotionals, and also some new poetry that's not out anywhere else.
All right. Well, hopefully some readers will go check that out and discover more about your writing.
I hope so. It's a fun place on Substack. I'm enjoying getting to connect with readers there.
That's great. It has been so much fun to work with Ashlyn on her projects, and she has been such an encouragement to me too in my writing journey, and such a cheerleader. And so I was thrilled to be able to bring her on today so that you all can have the chance to get to know her a little bit. And I hope you will go check out her books, her fiction and her nonfiction. And I hope that they will be a blessing to you. So once again, her main website is ashlynmckaylaohm.com. And let me spell her name for you. It's AshlynMcKaylaOhm.com. Ashlyn McKayla Ohm. So make sure you check that out. I will definitely be hoping to catch some of the U.S. Nationals Figure Skating Championships this weekend. However, because of different things going on this fall, and especially because I had 3 brothers get married last fall, I am a little bit behind in watching figure skating. So I need to catch up on the Grand Prix series, and I'm looking forward to doing that so I can keep up with who to cheer for, who's had the good seasons, and I look forward to doing that and then being able to watch nationals. I actually was able to attend nationals in person way back in 2017 when it was in Kansas City. And that was such a blast. My sister and I went, and it was so much fun to be there in person. It was a totally different experience than watching it on TV. I would highly recommend going if you are interested in that and have the opportunity. It was an amazing experience. We did get to meet a few of our favorite skaters too. Some of them we just ran into in the hallway, and so much fun to have your picture taken, with a gold medalist and things like that. That is not an opportunity that you get every day. Plus, I think it makes you feel more invested when you watch skating in the future. I've met that skater, or, I remember that routine when they talk about it later, and, just being able to cheer for those people. So the 2017 National Championships was Nathan Chen's first championship, so I got to see him, win his first national championship, and then, he went on to become an Olympic gold medalist after that point. But it is so cool to say that I got to see him win his first one, and that was the first program ever when 5 quadruple jumps had been landed. So I got to be there when history was made. So yeah, if you enjoy figure skating, I highly recommend going in person. And I also highly recommend Ashlyn's books, which give you the figure skating, and then also there's a lot of interpersonal relationships there that are woven throughout the stories, as well as a lot of faith. She has just really wonderful faith content that's very deep, and I know that you will be encouraged and edified by that. I would be thrilled if you would like to keep up with my writing journey as I seek the Lord for publication. You can follow me on Facebook or Instagram at author Erin Mifflin, and you can also go to my website, authorerinmifflin.com, to sign up for my newsletter, and that way you can keep up with all the information that I have, all the news, and I try to provide good content in my newsletter that will be of value to readers and encourage you. And you can also keep up with me. As I mentioned, I'm getting married at the time of this recording. The wedding is 43 days away. So if you would like to follow my love story and see wedding pictures and hear how my married life begins, definitely go over and follow me, and I would be thrilled to have you along. Right now, my own writing is kind of on pause because of these big happy life events, but my fiance is very encouraging me to get back to it after we kind of get past this big thing of getting married. So I'm thrilled that the Lord has brought me a wonderful man who is supportive and encouraging. So I hope that you have happy reading time, and if you are cheering for someone at the U.S. Nationals this week, please let me know, and I would be happy to hear from you. Until next time, happy reading.
Join us next week for another episode of The Well-Read Llama with your host, author Erin Mifflin. If you'd like to find out more about author Erin Mifflin, visit her Facebook and Instagram accounts.